What's going on, everybody? Gentleman94 here. Welcome back to Ben Builds. So glad you can join us here. This is episode number 3 on the 1/48 scale Eduard Albatros. Now, last episode I had talked a little bit about taking this engine and really kind of bringing it to life. Adding some wires, changing up things a little bit, adding some paint, of course doing some weathering to it. This is the majority of the episode today. That's what I want to focus on. I want to get this engine looking really cool. So what we're doing right now is I'm just cleaning up a few extra parts that I didn't get to last episode. We're going to get this all ironed out, and then we're going to check on how to install some wires. Once I have that figured out, I'm going to go ahead and airbrush the entire thing in NATO Black. That's going to give us a really nice base to work from. Then we're going to do some dry brushing. We're going to do some overall powder work, and we're going to get this engine looking the part. Now, I want to add some wires, one wire to each of the cylinders here. So there's going to be 6 wires on one side, so 12 wires total. But before I do any of that, I got to prime. Now again, NATO Black is really awesome. I love the color of NATO Black. It's got a little bit of black, a lot of grays in it, even almost a little bit of green in certain lights. It's got a really cool blend of color. We're going to use that as a primer coat. So let's go ahead and prime the whole engine and the little side exhaust manifold, or whatever that may be. And then we're going to come back, do a little dry brushing, and get some pastel work. Let's get some paint on this engine. With the engine more or less done, we're going to move on to the wires. Now I have this wonderful, really super thin instant glue. We're going to use that for the basic wire application. I also have my little paint pan here that I'm going to use as a holder for the super glue. Drop a little bit here on it. Then I would take some sort of applicator. I think I'll use a piece of wire like this, dip it in that super glue, and then dot it where I need it to go. For the wires themselves, I'm going to be using this very thin copper wire. We're going to take a little bit of a section off of this, just like that, and we're going to use that for our plug wires. That should be decent enough, and I should be hopefully able to work with that because it's pliable, and it should be a really awesome time. So, with the X-Acto knife, let's get started. So with the end of this spark plug cut off, we're going to add a little bit of a divot here with my pin vise, and we're going to make sure that it's deep enough, but not too big. I want it to be right in the middle. That looks pretty decent right there. So now we're going to just drop that end of that wire in, drop a little bit of glue on it, and position it to where it needs to be. So we have quite a few of these to do, so let's jump on in, get these things finished up. Now I'm going to go ahead and start painting up these side pipes here. The instruction says to paint them in a copper color. I don't have copper, I have bronze, but it should be decent enough because I'm going to weather it down because I don't think they'd be very shiny, especially with being heated up and then cooled down and heated up repeatedly. I think these will be dingier and dirtier, so it won't be so bright. So I think the bronze will work out well. Plus I'm going to layer over some pastels, really kind of weather it down. Yeah, that looks pretty cool. And this is basically the finished painted engine. So you can see I've got those kind of copperish pipes glued onto the side. On the other side, you can see the wires, each of those wires drilled into each of the cylinders. And of course, I got the wires on this side as well. Everything worked out beautifully. I love how it looks. It's real subtle, real tiny, but hey, at least I know it's there. And you guys know it's there too. For weathering, we're going to use some of these pastels, and I'm going to just take each one of these little bits and pieces here and just scrape it off. Take my brush, dab it right in that, and just brush it on. This is going to give it a little bit of a color shift, not going to be too crazy. I'm also going to use some weathering powder. Again, back to that AIM weathering powder. We're going to throw some of this dark gray all over to kind of tone everything down and kind of blend it together. Yeah, it looks pretty good. I like that. Let's get the other side as well. There we are. Yeah, this is looking great. When this gets into the engine compartment, I'm hoping that it's really going to make it just come alive. Nice. All right, a little bit more here on the side. I think we're good to move on. Now, last episode, we painted the inside of the cockpit. It is now finally dry. We also dropped the engine into the engine mount, which is also dry. Taken well over 3 or 4 days to go ahead and get that thing to cure. So I think we're at this stage, we're pretty clear to go ahead and start continuing to assemble the cockpit. Now, I don't want to do any crazy weathering on it, but I do want to start assembling the parts and pieces, like the front firewall. Right here, we have the ammo cans. They're painted, they're ready to go. Glue that down to the bulkhead, and we'll move forward from there. So let's go ahead and start cutting out some parts and pieces and see what we can come up with. All of these should be dry enough, at least for initial assembly. We're going to be using some XF20. This is going to be for the gray parts here in the cockpit. We do have this. This is RLM02, and they're very similar in color. So we're going to be going with the acrylic. I don't want to put oil-based paint on top of oil-based paint. It could be dangerous. All the gray parts are painted and are mostly dry at this point. I'm just working a little bit here on the parts and pieces to go ahead and start assembling the sidewalls of the cockpit. Now I have the front firewall with the ammo cans glued into place. I did that off camera. Now we're going to see if we can't place this little gauge cluster here on the side. I need to try to figure out where exactly this goes. The instructions aren't the clearest of instructions, kind of at an odd angle, but I think I know where we need to put this. So let me get out my glue and get this thing glued in. Now let's also move on to the other parts of the cockpit. We have to go ahead and build the floor, the rear bulkhead, the seat, the control column, the rudder pedals, and I think we have one other floor area we need to go ahead and install. So I'm going to cut these parts out and we're going to start putting them together. Now the floor itself is made up of 3 different areas. We've got the rear bulkhead, we've got the flat floor, and we have a front kind of a half bulkhead that has where the control stick would be mounted. So that's going to be interesting. Let's push through and glue these parts together. So with a quick test fit of the cockpit, I can see that this actually looks pretty cool. Now you can't see a whole lot in there, but you get a general impression. And once I throw the seatbelts on, I think this will really come to life. So we're going to go ahead and call it here for tonight, guys. I'm going to let this dry off camera, let this really cure, because the paint is actually still a little bit damp. I want to give it a couple more days to go ahead and fully cure. Then we're going to come on back and we're going to push on to the next area. So thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you back here next time on Ben Builds the Albatros D.III. Thank you so much, guys. Stay strong and keep on modeling.